Afternoon, everybody. I'm cold actually. I'm sitting there, need the heating on, but it's a bit late now to start changing. So, just looking at the pictures straight in front of us, we are considerate constructors. Just remember them, and then the 20% in the top left corner. Quick introduction about myself. I've been working at Transport for 22 years approximately. Before that, I've been in construction, I've been in security, I've been in care work. And over those years, not really taking the academic side until TfL took my taste or my flavour. And since then, I've been looking at major construction projects. This is just a little example of Vauxhall. I do a lot of work with project teams, looking at sustainable transport. I also do a lot of training with a lot of the teams. Thinking about construction management, HGVs, also how we can design around construction to help everybody be as efficient as possible. Under the ground, so utilities is a big issue. Also how we impact on the emergency services where we can help, especially with response times. And then with the community, and big thing about today is disability. Ooh, a bit too quick. Right, so the 20%, in the UK there are 11.6 million people that are disabled, limited long-term illness, impairment or disability, and 80% of those have a hidden disability. And we're saying here mobility is one of the most common impairments. Why is it important? 6 out of 10 of them are overweight. Dementia can be assisted by mobility. 26 billion. Brad, do you want to just mute, please? 26 billion a year on the UK economy. Type 2 diabetes is becoming more common. 3.8 million people in the UK, and 5 million are at risk of becoming having type 2 diabetes. And again, there's a big cost in the NHS. 1 million Londoners, that's nearly 1 in 9 of us, have got common mental disorder. And the worrying thing for me is a quarter of men, a third of women aged over 65 don't leave their house at all on a given day. Legislation, Equality Act 2010. Now just remember these sections 20 to 22, not to put a disabled person at its substantial, and I've underlined that because I don't think substantial should be in there, but disadvantage compared to a non-disabled person. Now, I just want people to write down or put in the chat box what they think disability means. So I'll just give you 2 minutes to write it down in your thoughts, whether it's on paper in front of you or in the chat box.
You are on mute, aren't you?
Yeah.
Still got a few people who need to mute themselves. Sarah. Give you 30 more seconds. It doesn't have to be a big story, just a couple of thoughts on what you think. Right, let's move on. Okay, so I'm going to start with cycling first. Cycling, I think, for me, is a little bit easier to manage because you tend to have a bit more road space to help you with what you're doing. This is a little survey done by Wilson Wellbeing, 200 plus respondents, 51% are unable to complete a journey. A little picture on the right-hand side might give you an idea of what happens there. 75% use their cycle as a mobility aid, and 75% find cycling easier than walking, and I'm in one of those categories. Now, we are quite good in London at what we do. We can do some quite decent cycling infrastructure. However, there is a big issue where we're still doing some of the old school stuff and using cyclist dismount signs. Now, it is in the Red Book Code of Practice, but it's something that at TfL we try and discourage, and just as a last resort, but it's the people that we impact on. A little example around the screen. Isabella's on the top right. She uses an adapted wheelchair. Kevin on the bottom right, he gets around cycling. You wouldn't even notice that he's only got one leg, but he does really well. But there's a lot of other people who don't have the same motor skills, and the side-by-side bike gives people an opportunity to get involved in cycling. And you can't dismount when you're cycling something like that. Now, just a quick example, we've got John Holiday on the line with us and Wendy. This is a bit of work FM Conway. So top left is myself taking a picture with the gentleman having a walk around where they're about to start some works. Original proposal was to dismount cyclists, but we looked at how we could do that better and design it around two people. So design it around Isabel, number one, and a taxi bike who do carry people who are disabled as well as everybody else who wants to get around. These are bespoke cycles. So we looked at what we could do and spent a bit of extra time and a bit of extra money on designing something around these two bikes. This was the final result. Now, the reason why I pointed at there that 10%, now that is super elevation. So if you're on a bend on a racetrack, you want it to be tilted up so you stick to the track. Now with many bikes, especially three-wheel and four-wheel, you could be displaced if it's on a flat bend. So we did some engineering on this. Also, we looked at every ramp, making sure it was comfortable for Isabel to use, and the longer bikes didn't bottom out, and also making sure the width was good, whereas normally you'd do a bare minimum for cycling. And this is like a little bit more of an expensive approach, but it's a nice way to do stuff. But then we go onto the footpath, and this is where the challenges become, and it's how it's managed. A nice little example here of it's not being managed, and we're not considering the people who are on the road. Just take these pictures in. And the question is, are we thinking of when we put traffic management out, who we're going to impact on? Now, for those that use a pedestrian crossing, this is a typical layout. You've got an L lead in, so the bottom arrow is either coming from either direction. Somebody who uses a cane will pick up that tactile paving. It will lead them to the road. They will put their right hand out and find the push buttons there, because it should be 500 millimeters to their right, and the same on the opposite side. And then you've got a nice straight aligned crossing. Now just write that down as well, 500 millimeters, please. So this is Dave. This is some work I did with Brian Council. He is actually walking his way, because we're going to cross the road here, to the lead-in section. If you notice where he would be led to that corner, something's missing. So he's got to the tactile paving now. There's nothing to his right-hand side. It's actually on the left-hand side facing the wrong way. Now, a little bit of thought and consideration moving the pole in the first place when you know the issues, it should be positioned in that corner. And this is what was missing here. And it wasn't just this one set of lights. Again, alignment, left-hand side. Now, Eurogel is also vision impaired. That could cause him an issue going straight across and having to veer across to get to the ramp. And then also you can see him struggling a little bit with the height of the push button. It's supposed to be a minimum of 1 meter. Little example here of not putting in the right position and also making it difficult to actually get somebody. So if you want to actually push the button, you might have to climb inside this to get to it. And on the right hand side, say for example, Dave was following the lead in, he'd walk into the sign. There's going to be times it's not worth me talking about it. So it's a nice little example here. Monica on the left hand side can't reach the push button, and the closer she gets because of the angle, she's still going to be less likely to be able to reach it. And the one on the right hand side is about 1.2 meters away from the tactile. And the confusing thing on this one is you've got the other push button that's in the same location. So that could still confuse somebody. Again, Monica's helping me out, auditing some stuff. She can't reach the button at all. And on the left-hand side, somebody's decided to make an obstruction to get somebody some extra steps in when they're going for a walk. Again, where you place signs. So there's a couple of issues here. One is Monica's got to go to the wrong side of the sign to get to the button. Then she'll have to reverse back or spin round to go onto the actual crossing point. And when you put signs in front of signals, you hide people. And there's a lady is in a wheelchair behind that sign. You can just about see the silver part of the wheel above the E. So a little bit of effort, you can make easy access to stuff. Now the cowls on the left-hand side, and you can see there's no barriers around them. So it's a nice, easy access for people. On the bottom side is, originally it was covered, but we removed it behind the sign to give some easy access. And it's not difficult. So you're going to see me moaning for about 40 minutes now through this presentation. This is Monica again. If you look at her face, it doesn't look exactly happy. And one of the questions that I ask contractors and traffic management people, if you're going to shut a footpath, what is the condition of the footpath that people are going to be expected to use? This is a little example of the other footpath. And again, pedestrians, please use other footpath. And I think you can see that they didn't actually go out and have a look at it, because that's also going to impact with parents with buggies. Now, Isabel had to go backwards 50 meters to come back onto the road to come round. You shouldn't have to do that. Do we use Google Maps to decide where we're going to divert pedestrians? And for Monica, that would have been about a 20-minute diversion route to get round to where she was wanting to go. And again, parents with buggies, older people, people with arthritis who struggle lifting their legs as high. This is a bit of a problem. And then if you do have a remaining footpath and you start causing other issues, like the hoardings come out to remove the drop curb, Isabel can't get up the drop curb, so then she's forced to use the road. And I talked about that quarter of men, a third of women that don't go out. Now, I'm not saying Isabel's that issue, she's a young woman still, but it can cause people to stay at home. Now, if you're going to form a temporary footpath, make sure it's actually usable. So from the left-hand side, if you're coming along, there's no drop curb, number one. Then you're going to get pushed into between a hoarding and a fencing. And this is me, I've actually asked them to make it wider because that's a bit of a 300 mil, 400 mil use. So another example here on Tooley Street. This is a little bit old, but we did this with Network Rail. The original proposal was to make Tooley Street one way, cyclists to dismount, and all the pedestrians to use the remaining footpath. Now, with that particular stretch, it was around 4,000 pedestrians an hour and around 800 cyclists during the peaks that we had to consider. And again, going back, thinking about side-by-side, disabled cyclist, cargo bike, is that going to be thought about in this traffic management method? So we use some technology called Legion modeling to understand the existing flows of pedestrians on the footpaths. The picture shows that it's reasonably comfortable on both sides. As soon as you shut it, you're putting everybody on one side, and that then breaches the comfort levels. There's a likelihood of people going to walk in the road. And if you're walking in the road, there's a likelihood you could be getting struck by a vehicle. So we work with Network Rail to widen the footpath to accommodate that amount of pedestrians. And you can still see on the picture on the right hand side, it was still hammered with the amount of pedestrians using it. And I mentioned 80% of that 20% are hidden disability. And this is just a few examples of, do you consider dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, dementia, hyperactivity, learning difficulties, claustrophobia? There's a whole heap more to think about, but do we consider that? And I think you know my answer. This is an introduction to another Isabel. This is my friend's cousin. We go for a walk every now and again. Isabel will follow signs as they tell her to do so. So if we go on these two pictures on the right-hand side and the top, there's a likelihood she will follow the sign and go into the road because it tells her to do that. And on the one on the bottom, it's saying go both ways. Now going to the right, we can see goes onto the cycle route that's supposed to be closed for cyclists to get into the footway to then get back into the cycleway. But to the left is called the River Thames. Now, for me looking at this, the sign's wrong. I'm going to ignore it. And then for Isabel, she might stand there for 10 minutes and get frustrated about it. And it could cause anxiety because she wouldn't know which way to go. Dyslexia, dyspraxia, multiple signs, multiple size text, multiple colors can all impact on people that can, not so much give somebody a breakdown, but cause a lot of anxiety. And some of the hoardings that we go out on the network is overkill. And I think this one on the right-hand side, that's just too noisy for me to even go near it. Natalie on the bottom left has a visual impairment. She's telling me around 30% vision. She likes to read as many signs as possible to get the full understanding what they want them to do. The gentleman that we went out for this site said the more the merrier. And I think, no, not the more the merrier, because Natalie will have to stand there and read all your signs. So if we take Natalie and put her in the top left scenario, how long is she going to take to read all that signs? Again, talking about autism. So for some young children that have a change of routine, it can cause problems. And anytime you then do that, you've also got to consider older people now, their distance of walking's gone longer. And a friend of mine's daughter with autism, she would have a breakdown kicking and screaming because she doesn't want to change the route. So you can avoid where we do have a bit of space. This is an example on Blackfriars Road. And Kia, with a construction site, needed to shut the footpath. And the original proposal was to divert. So we said, well, why don't we use some of the cycle lane to accommodate pedestrian movement? And this is an example of a temporary footpath we put in. The benefit of doing something like this, you only needed 2 signs at each end just to arrow pedestrians round to follow. Hoardings and gantries. The amount of hoardings and gantries that I see out on London's network, let alone around the country, there's a lack of consideration, especially on width and how we position them. And we assume that everyone's going to feel okay going through it. Autism again, strong, vibrant primary colors, complex patterns, shapes, different color lighting. The one on the right-hand side could cause some issues for people. The left-hand side, I've been looking at hyperactivity. Red is a power color. It can make people more hyperactive. Black can be seen as a whole by some people with dementia, which is the likelihood of not wanting to go near it, which means they could walk in the road. There is one benefit from that. I know some people have used black mats at the front door to stop people going out for a walk. And again, left-hand side, we've also got to think about fear of crime. So claustrophobia and fear of crime have got very similar outputs. Means people probably won't want to come out of the house. So anything you've got that looks dark could cause people then to walk in the road. And anything that's too narrow could put somebody in the road again. The picture on the right-hand side gives you a better idea of what we kind of are after. Nice, airy feel, wide hoarding that's got lots of room, and you've got plenty of feeling of escape, even though ideally we don't want you to. But it's just a nicer feel. And again, ramps. Are we considering everybody when we're doing roadworks? This is just an example of a mom and a child trying to get up a curb. Do we see what the problems are here? Now, the left-hand side bottom, which Isabel's, the ramp she's using there, that is a standard ramp that you can get hold of. And she struggles with these ramps. So why don't we make it more acute? And the right-hand side, because the way they put the barriers, Eurogel can't spin round. So there's a lack of space. I've done a little drawing on the top is if you made that flat and then put the ramp towards us, you'd be able to get round. And I don't know what those things are on the top left, because you should not be using ramps like that. And again, position of ramps. Have you considered that somebody in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter is able to turn to go down at a perpendicular angle and come off at a perpendicular angle? And these are 3 examples of where the lack of thought of where you're positioning the ramps. So ideally have good alignment and a nice slope for people to use. Now there are a variety of ramps out there, but just need a bit of thought about what you're doing and who lives in that area. Bus stops, and I did tell you it was just Megan Moan today. We need to make sure bus stops are accessible, because there's a lot of people out there who rely on buses, and there's a lot of people who can't walk very far if you start closing them. And the ones we do want open, we want to be fully accessible from both sides. So if the bus stop does get closed, the likelihood of a bus stop nearby will be over 400 meters away. And again, if you've got Doris who can only walk 50 meters max, and then she struggles after that, she'll go back in and stay at home. A little example, we made an effort on this. Top left, this is a construction area about to be starting works. They wanted to shut 2 key bus stops. So as part of TfL, we got a guidance that you find one as near as possible and try and avoid shutting it. But the curb has to be above 125 mil for the ramp to be deployed to bring a wheelchair on. Now, the problem that we found was on the bottom left is this was the closest bit that had a bit of space to do a bus stop with 50 mil curb height. So if you haven't got the height, make it the height. So we worked with the developer and the council, and we made it the right height so it was fully accessible. Yes, it's going to cost a bit of money, but I'm thinking about the local community. Now I say assault course because we've got a lovely habit of making people's lives difficult walking around on the network. This is in Vauxhall, so just around the corner from the bus station. So you do have quite a heavy footfall. I would normally put a phrase, "This is not my job to sort it out, mate. I've got something else to do," but we've all got a responsibility. Cable ties, trip hazards, wing mirrors of lorries, keep them all in, keep them trimmed, check them. If the barriers are starting to wear or they're starting to turn up, change them or spin them round. And again, parking. Now, I get annoyed when it's people parking on the footpath near where I live. And when you've got construction vehicles or construction staff doing the same kind of thing, who are we impacting in that local community? And again, you should not have to walk in the road. If somebody's parking on the footpath, why do we do that? And a little example of a scaffolding truck facing the wrong way on a one-way street, blocking the cycle lane as well. And that's a contraflow cycle lane. So the cyclists will be coming towards us the same direction the lorry's facing. And we've got surfaces to worry about. Now this particular construction site, the ramp was too steep. And if you can just look at how the buggy is. Now the gentleman below, the likelihood of him potentially falling over because he won't be able to balance himself. Same with an older person, same with a wheelchair user, same with a visually impaired person. So the list goes on. And again, what you use as well, because there are mats out there to protect the footpath, but are they protecting the people who are using the footpath? So I've written, it's only a bit of water. What's in that water? So just spend 1 minute, just write down what you think could be in this water by a construction site. So I'm all right, I can walk through it, I can walk around it. It doesn't get in my hands. I don't have to take wheels into my front room to go on the floor for my daughter to pick up off the floor and put in her mouth. There's a lot of issues that we need to think a bit more about. Then some of the things we design in is potential, again, fear of crime, who's around the corner, who's around the edges of the barriers. Does the hoarding have lighting? Has the hoarding removed the drop curb? Somebody going to trip there? The two working together, it's not a good thing. And again, what do we do in the day that causes an issue at night? And I've talked about black hoardings already, but black hoardings can also make an area feel darker. So when it does go to nighttime, it's not a nice environment. So what are we doing? Hopefully I'll try and pick this up a little bit now, but we've got a working group called Disability Caused by Work. So we introduce to the industry, but we also invite a lot of people to come from all walks of life. We drafting a guidance document to help guide people on what to avoid, if possible. We do what's called equality impact assessments on our own projects. So we look at the 9 characteristics. We also do something called 3-tier assessments, which I'll explain in a minute. Constructor experiences. So if you don't experience it yourself, how do you know how to design for it? And value in people workshops. So what's a 3-tier assessment? Before we start going out and doing any works, we go out and find out what the local community is about, who lives there, who's likely going to have an issue with what I put out on the road. But we also work with the local cycle groups and have a look for the cycling perspective. So if you go out and have a ride, you know that probably doesn't feel very nice if there isn't any cycling infrastructure. So we need to consider that. Then you've learned something, put it into your traffic management. Now the left-hand side is somewhere in Old Street where we could put some nice safe cycling going through the works and we can maintain good width for walkways. But it wasn't perfect, so we looked at alternative routes as well. So working with the local cycle group, we cycle around the area to find nice, efficient, not too long diversion routes that could be used as an alternative. And then when you are doing the work, go out and test. Go and see how it feels. Invite some people from the local community to let them tell you what they think. And you're building relationships to move forward. So what we're doing with the construction companies, we take them out on rides. We ride through roadworks, we ride through unsafe areas to know the differences. But we also walk around the sites as well, and often invite people to come with us to give them their feedback. And then we've also got Valiant People workshops. Now with COVID, it's stopped, but we will be starting back again. And it's working with adults with learning difficulties. And you should never assume what we put out is easy for everybody to understand. And by spending time with these people, who are fantastic, by the way, and very humbling, you will learn more and hopefully you'll move forward in how you do your stuff. So what did people say on what does disability mean to you? Now, I can't see the chat because I'm on the screen.
I'll tell you what's in the chat.
Yes, go on, if you can help me out a little bit.
I will help you out, absolutely. So we had hearing, speech, lack of mobility, an impairment of physical and mental ability, an impairment of any sort of mental, physical, or anything that a person finds restrictive, unable to use full range of physical and or mental senses and abilities, conditions that limit their movement, senses or activity. And Anna has just posted in, which is brilliant. She said, define disability: a visible or invisible physical or mental health disadvantage that makes a person less mobile. A disability may impair quality of life, especially in the areas of public transport, access to buildings, social venues, work, leisure, sports, inclusion, going on a day about day-to-day activities. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's simplify it a little bit. And it's us that causes barriers to access. So if you write that one down as well, this is something that's important to remember. So just a little example here is the disability is not being able to get to the push buttons across the road safely because the barriers are around it. Just a little simple thing like that, or it's something's too steep or too rough or too dark. Different colours can impact people to cause people to stay at home. You just now stop somebody from living their life. So we can make a difference, and I'm saying don't be the one to cause the disability. Right, big apologies. So I do get very frustrated. I'm very passionate about this kind of stuff, and it's how we can do things better. So I'm going to close the screen now. Let's just open up and have a chat.
Thank you, Michael. Amazing presentation, as always. The last 3 sessions, I'm sure everyone will agree, have been really, really informative, and lots of moments of really why. But thank you so much. So we'll open up to the floor. Does anybody have a question or some feedback for Michael? The chat is a bit crazy, Michael, so I think we'll just open it up for people to ask, because catching up with the chat, there's about 40 messages in it. So
fire away. Who wants to ask something or wants to say something?
Okay, Sylvia's put her hand up. Sylvia, what would you like to say?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. So I'm Sylvia Gothrow, and I'm from a cycling campaign organisation in North West London. To get back to the point about, you know, for instance, when the traffic light is not put properly, I mean, how does that work in practice when there's a site, so there's construction workers doing something? Is there not someone supposed to sign off the work? And as if we do witness that, because we do sometimes feed this back to the council, but they always kind of push the ball around saying, oh, it's not us, it's those people. So who is responsible in a borough council situation to make sure that doesn't happen?
I would say we're all responsible. So at TfL, if I'm going to prove some traffic management, I need to make sure I'm aware of what it could cause. So I'm responsible for that. The contractor should be what's been agreed, the contractor should follow out and put out what's been agreed, and then also check it, but then also me to make sure it has been checked. So I'm checking the contract to say, has it been checked, and can you give me some feedback? Or do I go out on site and have a look myself? Now, what we've got is the road network is not a nice blanket surface to play with. So you will have lots of obstruction. So one of the pictures I showed was a lamp column with a push button on, and there was no real good location to put the temporary light. And it's how do we work around this? So there are going to be times when we're challenged, but it's the consideration is the big thing. The first thing you should be thinking about is what I do, who will it impact on?
Thank you.
Ruben, you look like you wanted to say something.
Michael, I wanted to know, I mean, great session, first of all, but my concern is when you go, when a disabled person like myself goes out into London and we see these things, what's the best way to manage that? Who's the best person to complain to? Because if you do that to somebody who's on site, they'll brush it off. It's like, not my job, not my problem. I did what I was told to do. What would be the best way forward for someone?
Just complain to us. So a lot of people use Twitter. There are portals out there. There's some web links, etc. TfL have got some report it sections you can put it on, and the boroughs will do something very similar. Also, the contractor, let them know. People do listen. One of the big challenges is education. And part of the group that you're, because I know because you're part of my group, so we come there, is we're highlighting that we do need better education. That's me included. I'm learning stuff new all the time. But yeah, you have to speak about it. You have to keep telling people. And yes, it's a complaint. I'd complain. If it was my mum, I'd be complaining for my mum.
Thank you.
I think just following on from that, Ruben, sorry, I'm, for those who don't know me, probably most, I'm the group manager in Hackney that deals with activities such as developments, roadworks, street works, the whole package. And the key is, as you say, Ruben, is trying to navigate a highway authority's hierarchy and trying to find out who is the right person to speak to. If in doubt, always go to ask for the engineering service, or as we're all nicely called now, street scene. And you will find, if you ask for somebody like the head of street works, i.e. myself, in Hackney, you will tend to find a person who will be able to deal with the issues that you've got. One of the things that Michael did say about, you know, around the constant checking of sites, it's about we've got resources in terms of construction compliance, you know, so and we will penalize if an organization, including our own, do not comply with the requirements of what they've said they were going to put up, then there are financial penalties for that. So, plus an obligation to put it right.
That's good to know. Thank you.
So if no one's going to ask, let's start firing out some questions then. Who we got on? So Ian Fern, are you right to answer a question just to see what your thoughts about are from today?
Yeah, fine, far away.
So would you like to introduce yourself, please, Ian?
Hi, Ian Fern, the MD of Ferns Group. We do a lot of more temporary utility works in London, gas, Thames Water, etc. Saying that, we're not the ones who normally put out the Chapter 8 works to do these, but we have to quite often comply with what's there with a larger vehicle, etc., than that, which is a problem for us. And we're forever trying to get in with the utilities to think of others after they've done their work. And listening to the other gentleman, a good idea maybe on the permit to work boards would be to maybe as a condition they have to have a specific contact number written on those, because all mobile works, I'm not sure about your other building site, have a board And if they were to have a contact number that was actually somebody on the end of the phone with that with the permit number, might be a way to put the complaint through.
No, that sounds good, Ian. Thank you. I know, because a lot of the time, because I see your teams out, and you're handed over somebody's traffic management for that time you're spent there, and it's like a construction site. If you had a demolition contractor who's put up a hoarding, and then the new contractors inherited that hoarding that might not be in a desired kind of layout, how do we then change it? And then reactive costs are always very painful for people. So this is where the capital P as in for planning is really important.
Yeah, I understand. A lot of our works are reactive, where they're not planned, but then you say generally there are people on site, and we give training to help people, because there aren't always the provisions there like you were showing in some of your videos, but people can help, and there's more than one person. But yeah, the problems can come when there's concrete curing or things going off, and there might not be somebody on site, which can cause problems, which is something maybe we all need to look at a bit more.
So we got. So Justin from Merton, any thoughts of how you would take this forward for the construction stuff around that's coming up?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm working for Merton Council. I'm events and licensing officer. We're, as you know, Michael, we're setting up a construction working group soon. Something we haven't done before is to basically copying your idea and getting the larger constructors in the borough together and talking about best practice and disability accessibility. And so we're going to be pinching a lot of your ideas and doing something similar to the 3-tier assessment, where we're going to go walkabout with people with volunteers with different disabilities and the contractors, and see what sort of difficulties we come across, and there's bound to be some. Yeah, this is fairly new for us, and as you say, I think we're all learning all the time, and that was quite an important message for me, is that we need to get that across, that you and I and everybody else are learning all the time. The education is very important. I can convey that to the people that the constructors and all the people that are responsible for traffic management. Then yeah, I think that's the way forward. Thanks, Michael.
Oh, cheers. No, because I know it's important. I think one of the key things is to make sure you're talking to the planners. You've got that there. That's the early time to capture this, to say, right, you have to make sure you've got construction logistics plans. It's incorporating this thinking now.
Yep, that's something we're trying to get it written into the planning consent as we speak, so that part of the planning permission is to contact our department and present a construction management plan or construction logistic plan, or at the very least, it's a requirement that they must contact us, so that we know what's happening on our borough, because quite often planning permission, we don't talk with the planning department. Planning permission's given, and we don't even know these things are going ahead a lot of the time. So yeah, that is critical.
Yeah. Like
Michael, we've got a question from Francis in the chat, and then Dave Holiday has his hand up. Francis says, where do we go to get more help in guidance or training around to improve safety and access around construction sites? And what training is available for site marshals? Right, so there's a few providers that do stuff on training. Now, clocks are supplying this construction logistics plan training. TfL do little bits. We've got an elite marshal training course. Simone, who I work with, who's online today, is part of the diversity inclusion team. We're also working on that. The industry, you've got the construction industry, but you've also got the design teams that also need a lot of help. It's happening, but getting guidance, Francis, you can come and join the guidance working group that we're doing. So we're bringing people together to find out all the issues and trying to how we would mitigate that. So come along to that and have get a feel to see what we're up to there. But there is training out there, but it's just that maybe it just needs to be tweaked. I'd say, can I ask Simone a question?
because I know this is something we talk about from time to time, because there's so much legislation out there that doesn't seem to be getting listened to or incorporated. From a D&I perspective, what else have we got coming up? If you're still there, Simone.
I can't see her, Michael.
I am
There she
here.
is. There
Simone.
you are, Simone.
Sorry, trouble unmuting. Oh goodness me. In the construction side, this very specific side, I think it all interlocks. So there is a lot of work going on at the moment. I mean, we're all aware of, I think, of street space. I don't know if it hasn't entirely been popular in all quarters. So I don't think I'm much alone in saying that. There's been massive consultation, which has actually prompted and been absolutely brilliant. So I know sometimes we have to go through a painful process to get to some of the good stuff, but I do want to say that in TfL I'm really encouraged. I mean, not only of course the work that Michael's been doing and been championing, but there is some real work going on in TfL to make sure we get better links up, to make sure we're very aware that things are being said and then they're being said and then they're being said again, and people outside of TfL are not always seeing the thought from that. I mean, obviously the proof of the pudding. So, you know, it's hoping that you get to see the difference, but I think it really has hit home. It's amongst to make sure you get that linked up thinking of what people, how we implement things, how we respond on how we implement things, and how that then works in the actual out in the street. And actually operationally, and not just construction, but the temporary changes that we've had to make over COVID. So, no, I'm not giving you anything specific, but there are meetings out specifically to address this. So, hopefully, we will be getting better and learning.
Thanks, Simone.
Brilliant, thank you. Michael, do you want to go over to David Holiday now? He has his hand up for you.
Yeah, I hope this is going to come okay for sound. I've usually used the iPhone, but it keeps dropping out. So, do you mind if I share screen on something? Just to show you what is a very appalling thing that may well arise on some sites.
Yeah, go on, Dave.
Okay. This caused, should we get it up? This caused a number of injuries. Can you see it?
Yeah.
This caused a number of injuries on the Clyde Tunnel when work was taking place. It was actually put in as a speed hump. But as you see, it's far more than a 6mm step into the rubber, a pretty square edge over the top. These are cable covers that are used on outdoor events for feeding cables across walkways, but they're totally inappropriate for putting across a cycle route or even a footpath that's being used by wheelchairs.
There's a lot of ramps out there, Dave, that covering cables that are serious trip hazards.
Yeah, I'm aware. I mean, I've posted something, Section 28, and I don't know how far we can push Section 28 of the Town Police Clauses Act 1847, because that, I think it carries a level 3 offence for leaving staff blocking the footway. And I know to my sort of benefit that it also means a clearance of 8 feet. And some of those crash decks are below 8 feet, obviously, because of the way the scaffolding is constructed. What are your thoughts on, you know, crash decks and tunnels?
It all depends how it's designed.
Mm.
I think it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I look at so much stuff out on the network. There's some good bits. There's some nearly good bits, and there's a lot of bad bits. I was going to say there's some, you know.
Yeah,
but I think one of the challenges we have is it's great at senior management level, because there's a lot of drive and, you know, want this to happen, but it's how it goes down to the workers on the ground.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you haven't got the equipment in, you'll get the next best thing, and sometimes the next best thing is something like this.
Yeah, that's quite critical in the way it's being presented to people. You know, I rail at times at the number of places that aren't really well equipped. The other is in Scotland, we're quite lucky. We've got Section 95 of the Road Scotland Act, which is very, very clear and explicit about mud on the road. But I think south of the border, you've got quite a mess of different bits and pieces of legislation to try and emphasise to people that they've got to keep the road clean. How does that bear up? Because you showed the sort of messy puddle. I've come across places where, you know, the vehicles coming off site have not been washed off, and there's a trail of mud across the footway and down the road.
Yeah, that's a condition in planning to make sure the wheels are clean and you're not putting all the muck on the road, because it's not just on the footpath, it causes hazards for motorcyclists and cyclists. I'd say more of a worry for motorcyclists.
Yeah, but I mean, we do have, actually, you say it's a planning condition. Do you have in England and Wales the same sort of simple one-shot offence of being able to say that's mud on the road, or that's, you know, clippings on the road?
That's probably something I'll have to chase up on that. I'm not sure you've got great memory of some of the legislation, but no, it's.
I'm dangerous that way.
Yeah, no, the teams we work with on the construction collaborations, this is where we put it down to make sure everyone's tidying up. It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
There was another thing I was going to pick up on, but I'll see if I think of it a bit later. So I'll catch up from that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. Does anybody else have a question for Michael? Yes, Julian's put his hand up.
Hi there, Michael. Thanks very much. Julian from Westminster University. I just wondered if you could tell us, you mentioned the draft guidance document that the working group had been drawing up, and I just wondered if that was something that was available, and if so, where we might be able to look at it.
It's a work in progress.
Okay.
Just finished the guidance document on cargo bikes, so this is one that's going to have more attention on now. And a lot of the utility, I'm not so sure if we've got any utilities on today, but we're doing a lot of work with Cadent, introducing Thames into this as well to get that feel, and people like Conway as well that I need. So I know John's already done quite a lot of work with us, and Conway's have taken a big leap on diversity within their business, but it's still a lot of work to do. But no, you're more than welcome to come along to the next group. If you drop me a private email.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
I'll send you an invite out to there, and that goes for you as well, Francis. Because there's a lot of people who are on today come to this group.
Great, thanks so much.
Brilliant.
There's a question from Stephen Pallister. Do you want to bring that out?
Yeah.
Steve?
Where is he? Here he comes. He's unmuting.
I'm here.
You're here.
Here.
Welcome, Stephen.
Hi. As Michael will know, I was part to do with 292 Vauxhall Bridge Road, and yeah, I was just sort of curious because I sort of got it prepped up, ready for the demolition to take place, and then sort of come away. So I only see it in the period of time that I was on the project for, which was long enough to be fair. But just wondered how the scheme worked, because obviously part of it was, I think, was assisted by Michael as far as design. I know Michael Todd just obviously brought up about the paint, and I'm quite curious as to where we would find out what are the better colours to be incorporating, because as you probably know, Michael Barrett, sometimes you're sort of swayed by the client and what their preferred colours and branding and stuff like that. I think we're in a position that we have to sort of push them away, certainly if there's any better colours to be chosen.
Soft palettes. That's your answer. A soft palette. So gentle blues, greens. If you have a read about some of the websites on ADHD, it'll give you some idea of how colours impact people.
Is that actually put down anywhere, Michael? Like formally?
Sorry, say that again?
Is that actually made available in any literature anywhere or guidance?
Yeah, it's massive. If you look on the internet, there's so much scholarly articles written on this.
Yeah.
I think where Stephen's coming from is there any official guidance that he can tap into to maybe refer his clients to, I guess, Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is guidance out there, but the guidance document we're working on has that in there as well. So avoid black, which we did discuss about the black.
Yeah,
which didn't happen. It went, but the client put it in, and the problem is that tunnel you've got now is quite dark because the location. There's there's a lot of corners in the gantry, which means people are using it for a toilet. So you've got an aroma in there. You've got this dark feel. And I was down there with Michael this week, and there was vomit on the floor that hadn't been cleaned up. So imagine if you're in a wheelchair and you're trying to get around all this little obstructions. We need to do better.
Yeah, I think some of it comes down to
Ruben,
maintaining it as well, doesn't it? So.
But it's something that we would need, say, your company, like every company, to take a policy and take a stand on it. Says, right, no, we're going to push this. And if the clients aren't fully aware of some of the challenges, let us talk to them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's us in a position that needs to change that. So, and give them guidance what they can and cannot. And
McLaren, who are your adjacent contractor on the other side of the road, they, as soon as they put the hoarding up, they put a light grey up. So they didn't put like they were going to put up originally. So they didn't have to then spend extra money on paint.
Yeah.
Ruben, did you want to mention about obstructions on the road that you have to get around? And a lot of it is not nice, is it?
No, I mean, I usually try to wear gloves, but I mean, it's just gotten so bad now. It's just easier to constantly be washing my hands even more than I already do. You know, between all of the physical barriers and everything I have to go through, it's just filthy. And then I end up having to have 2 different wheelchairs. I can't be cleaning my wheels when I get out of the car to go into another wheelchair. So I have 2 different wheelchairs, one for indoors and one for outdoors, and it's just an absolute mess. It's a disaster out there.
What we'll have to do, Ruben, is you come out on one of the tours with us.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if we got any project managers on, I did notice one. Alan, you're right to have a chat from TfL.
Yeah, I thought you might give me a shout, Michael. So, yeah, afternoon, everyone. Alan Lofts here, project manager for Old Street Roundabout scheme in the centre of town, and yeah, been involved with a couple of assessments with Michael over the years. And I think one of the key kind of things that came out of one of our assessments was we're quite near Moorfields Eye Hospital, so we actually put on the back of all our traffic signs some marker tape that goes around the outside. Very, very simple and free, effectively. You know, how much does a roll of tape cost? So yeah, that was a very, very quick and simple thing, and wouldn't have ever considered it if we hadn't have done the 3-tier assessment. So yeah, it was a very, very worthwhile exercise, and I think we highlighted a couple other things as well, some crossing points that weren't quite lined up, and we, the dished drainage channels that you get quite often around town. We actually worked out that a lady that came out on the tour with us, I forget her name now, but she was a wheelchair user, and it worked out that the angles when we'd put a dropped curb in with the dish channel as well, it ended up getting the wheels get completely locked. I think the back wheel or the front wheel was in the dish drainage channel, and the back wheel was at the bottom of the ramp. So yeah, it was a real eye opener, and of course we wouldn't have ever realized these things if we hadn't have seen it sort of first hand. So yes, I thoroughly recommend getting these type of inspections undertaken, or get if people are available, Michael's available to arrange. They are definitely worth their weight, and yeah, and a real eye opener. I think sort of going forward, I mean, it's the trouble is, Old Street, we often change round RTM, and I think a lot of people on site, the operatives, they often do things thinking that they're doing the right thing, and quite often they think they're solving a problem, but inadvertently create another. And I think it's just kind of getting them to think a little bit further than just the initial problem, like, oh, I think I'll move this traffic cone because I think it's in the way of that. But actually now they don't think about the problem that they've created. They've solved one problem and created another, which is so I think it's the guys on site also that actually probably would benefit from kind of a little bit of training and insight perhaps into how their actions can impact on other people, and also to get the contractors just to appreciate that doing the bare minimum and just being compliant probably just isn't enough these days. It's, I don't like it when I'm talking to the contractor, so, well, it's the standard, why should we do any more? That attitude these days doesn't wash with me particularly well, and yeah, we need to be kind of maximizing the access that we're giving to all road users. And yeah, and it is challenging. I mean, not every single situation you're able to make provide a gold standard, but we need to be providing the best that we can, and where we can't, we need to be making sure that the alternatives are suitable and well signed. At Old Street at the minute, we've got potentially a footway closure coming up on one of the sides, so we need to yeah, giving me some food for thought just listening to the talk today, and just assessing the that alternative route, just to make sure that it is suitable for crossing points, particularly across side roads, etc. So yeah, that's if that's of any help, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's good.
Thank you, Alan.
It's also, we've got people on the call that have got a fleet. So not everybody does roadworks or construction, but they are part of the supply chain.
Mm.
So we've got Speedy on, we've got O'Donovan's.
Yeah.
What policies are in place for drivers who have not to block footpaths, not to leave their engines running is another issue. Any thoughts?
Michael,
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want people to respond to that? We're just
quick,
thinking,
yeah,
when you've done that, just go over to John Holiday. He's put his hand up as well.
So, Jacqueline, you still on? Maybe she's there. Or Matt Seaman, what are you doing with your fleet?
Morning, me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Jacqueline.
Sorry, buttons everywhere.
Bless you. He came to you with a question, Jacqueline. So
sorry, Michael. Someone was trying to say goodbye because some of them are part-timers in this firm. What was the question, Michael?
The question is, so I just brought it up about people who've got a fleet. So not everybody's involved in roadworks and the actual constructions. Like yourself and Speedy will be part of that supply chain, delivering stuff and then coming away.
Yeah.
Not a lot of the time, and I understand drivers are under a lot of pressure, especially with taco and trying to find somewhere to get taco breaks. But do you have policies on not to park on footpaths, not to leave your engines running, certain placement of skips? Is that within policy within your business?
So the placement of skips is quite easy because 9 out of 10 times it's where the council dictates the skip has to go. So we have to put it legally where the permit says it goes. With regards to the fleet and idling, we did an idling campaign years ago when, you might remember better than me, Michael, TfL brought out a poster with a set of keys and an asthma pump hanging off it. So I reckon it's probably 5 or 6 years ago now. We brought out an anti-idling campaign whereby we did red, amber or green certificates to the drivers. And of course, in them days, pre-COVID, they came in every Friday to download the Digitacos. And of course, nobody wanted to collect a red certificate. And we reduced the idling by 50% within 4 weeks. So we've adopted simple measures. But yes, the boys are very good. They don't park on pavements. A lot of the London sites now have holding bay areas or an area away from the site. But yeah, no, we don't get any complaints with regards to drivers being inconsiderate, etc. Probably because of CCTVs on the lorry, we can see the driver, whether he's in the cab or out the cab, where he's parked, etc. So no, we don't get that many complaints.
No, it's good though. It's just to get that support and keep banging away, because when somebody's tired, they're not thinking straight. And
Our drivers are what I call 9 to 5. They go home every night, so we don't suffer from fatigue. We brought in the Dynamo project, which teaches them a breathing mechanism, which allows them to stay calm so they don't have road rage. And it's paid massive dividends, especially on the reduced insurance premium.
Yeah, well, I've got to look for the right carrots, haven't you, to get the benefits.
Yeah.
Matt,
always a carrot, never a stick.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jacqueline.
You're
Matt,
welcome.
just a quick one before I go to, where is he? To John. You're on mute, Matt, I think. Can't hear you. Very, very quietly. It's that kind of volume you're giving me that when you're offering me £500. You might need to have to put it in the chat box, Matt. Let me go over, I'll go over to John because I know we're wary of time. And then we'll come back. John?
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I'm a director at Conways. So we're one of the big contractors with TfL. I just really wanted to talk about education. I did the 3-tier assessment with you, Michael. And my designers would say, right, a 1.2 footway, that's what it says in the book, that's fine. And we walked along a bit of footway, and it blatantly wasn't fine, because it meant if you were in a wheelchair, there was no way of getting past anyone else. So it's just sort of things like that, that, you know, you read the book and, yeah, that's what it tells you. But I think you've got to look at it on site specifically. And I found, you know, doing that 3-tier assessment was very enlightening for that kind of thing. Because I think you sort of, you know, if you said to me minimum footway, I'd say 1.2, because it's been ingrained in my head, but it doesn't fit everywhere. And I think that's important to consider. Another thing that you're talking about fleets, you know, low-level cabs, we're using a lot in central London now, just because of the visibility. It gets so much better visibility. And an interesting sort of aside from the driver said he goes home much less stressed, because, you know, he feels he's driving something that, you know, he can control. Whereas if you're sort of right up high in a traditional cab, you know, you're feeling, you know, you're driving 32 tons of metal around central London, and, you know, he goes home quite stressed. So things like that, you sort of, so I think talking education is so important, because you pick up different ideas and different thoughts. And then I think the other one, obviously you got me on a Boris bike, and again, that was interesting to do, because you know, you suddenly feel how, you know, how vulnerable you can feel on a bike, you know. And, you know, I'm normally sat in the car, to be honest, or pedestrian, but getting on a bike, yeah, I think it's just, yeah, interesting. And we actually do an exchange thing with our Grab drivers. You know, they will go out on bikes for exactly that reason, you know, so they can sort of feel that if you're not giving that cyclist space, you know, you can feel how uncomfortable it is. So to me, education is the key to it, really, just getting everybody understanding the points of view of others.
And I think when you're talking about education as well, is going out on a bike's one thing, but you imagine you're sitting on a bike, you've still got a good height that you can see above a car potentially, or in front. Imagine if you're an adapted wheelchair that's on the road, the height then you'll be able to see above a car. So you're in, I wouldn't know, because I haven't done it yet myself, but I think this is something as part of the education. We widen the spectrum of what you could be doing. Wow.
So I'd say they're the 2 tiers. I mean, the first bit is also getting the planning rights, you know, and again, that's talking with the clients. I think that's very important. I'd say, you know, going back 5-10 years, you know, the amount of road space for vehicles was the primary concern, and we've got to keep 2 lanes here, and we've got to keep, you know, and to be fair, I think, you know, the clients are coming around to, you know, considering all you know, all users. So that has improved quite a bit, but, you know, I think you know, we need to be challenging if we feel we're trying to squeeze too much into something. You know, maybe we should be going for a closure, or going for a, you know, something a bit more drastic. But I'll say I think that is improving. But, you know, a few years ago, that if you couldn't keep that road open, that was a big problem. So again, it needs everybody to work together to find the best solution.
No, you're right there. I think this is something we're doing as part of the new TfL contracts. We're all going to be doing, it's probably going to be lumped on me quite a lot of the training. It's building that partnership up, and the partnership's the important thing, because again, money has got a big thing to do with it. So we do have to understand that we've got to help save money at the same time, but you can be frugal and do some, there's ways of allocating road space with a bit more thought. Thanks, John. Does anybody else want to jump in on anything?
Ruben's raised his hand again. I think Brian's got something he's just put in the chat, but he's unmuted, so he might want to come up. And also Dave Holiday has got something else as well for you.
I just have a quick question to expand on what John was talking about. We keep talking about this compliance, about minimum requirement to be compliant, and I don't understand, what would it take to change this legislation, this compliance as minimum, to be updated or considered, and why does it have to be an exception to the rule in order to go out with somebody to have a better understanding? Why can't this be in actual legislation?
Yeah, no, tough one. I think because we've got such an old infrastructure, and a lot of the time we can't get this in on the standards. We do need DFT involved, because this is a lot of it's written from that side now to make change. We're getting there, Ruben. Not as quickly as a lot of people would like, and I do normally go 100 miles an hour, but it's a slow process. But the more people that work together on it, the more pressure we can put on certain groups. And it needs to come from bottom up, as well as the top, because the top down tends to get lost somewhere. The bottom up is really important.
All right, thanks.
Dave?
Okay, yeah, Hello, Jacqueline. Nice to hear you're also talking about holding areas. And that was one of the points I'm just going to bring up with here is that deliveries. Quite often you find that your marshals have got to organise the traffic. And I'm quite picky on attendance on foot, not just for reversing, but also for forward movements. Because quite often you're moving these vehicles, even though they're on the road, they're going forward. So we don't need an attendant on foot, he's not reversing. But we've got incidents of people being killed because a large vehicle is trying to manoeuvre around with parked cars, with other obstructions, and quite often under time pressure.
Just on that one, because I kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on community. I know it's a safety's right, but
I'm thinking more of you know, when somebody drives out of the site, you've got to have your marshals stopping the pedestrian traffic going across the access, and you've got to consider that you may have blind people there who don't appreciate this barrier coming across. They're not aware of it.
Yeah, no, ideally, education for marshals. So as part of the elite marshal training, we're given awareness of community. So it doesn't involve teaching somebody how to marshal. But a lot of the stuff we do, memorandum of understandings, a lot of the construction sites to put in certain methodology. So if you use a concertina barrier to block the footpath, and I would say the people who are disabled or older people tend to be are more compliant. It's us in general. In a rush on my phone, you're in my way, and I'm just going to walk around and put themselves at risk.
Yeah, it's a hell of a job being intended to try and manage traffic. And you're not just managing the driver, but you're managing all the pedestrians and cyclists trying to fly everywhere.
But marshalling is really important. I think marshals are very underrated. If we upgrade the marshals, because the marshals will save Jackie and her team money, because if they can get them in smoother, you're not delayed as long. You're not kept waiting.
Yeah.
This is what we do. We look at all these strategies for efficiency and regulation.
And the other I'm looking at and talking to people, it's actually been resolved without an inquest and without the driver actually being found guilty of anything. But it's something that should have been more investigated. Was mobile works. An old lady was killed, ironically, by a team who were painting 20-mile-an-hour signs on the local roads. There was an attendant on foot seeing a reversing manoeuvre out because the back end of the vehicle coming out of one road came out onto the main road into a lane. He then ran up the side of the truck as the driver made a full lock left turn to pull over into another road. The dear old lady was crossing the other road. She was in the blind Steradian initially and just then got knocked down. Fortuitously, she went between the front wheels, so she didn't die under the front wheels. The attendant on foot jumped into the cab, not noticing that there was an old lady lying underneath the truck, and she was killed by the rear wheels driving over her. Now, it makes me think that there ought to be some little consideration on mobile works.
Yeah.
Because we're going around putting in a lot of pop-up schemes, and pop-up schemes are mobile works where you're running along, you know, you're sitting in so many bollards. And I don't know if it's you or Mark from City Infinity, but commenting that people painting these white lines don't seem to be enforcing a safety zone around themselves as they're painting the white lines on.
Well, that's something. Can you drop me a line on that? Just because I'm going to. It's all part of the new contracts because we will be doing night. A lot of it will be nighttime works when using the vehicles, and we'll have reduced teams as well.
Yeah. Nighttime
works tends to be more costly, so you'll have there's a bit more frugal approaches on stuff.
Yeah, because I think FMC have got some interesting videos as well of the guy who collapsed at the wheel and ploughed into the tarmac, and then the other guy who got the back of his jacket ripped off when he had a blowout on the motorway. And a passing truck just literally took the buttons off the back of his jacket.
So, there's so many little situations that we need to make sure we're considering.
Yeah.
Lessons learned, because these have been near misses, and the industry doesn't really react well enough to saying this was a near miss. Let's report it and let's make people learn from that so we don't have the fatal mistake.
Yeah, no, you're right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Do you want to just go over to Brian Foxton, Michael, because he did have one last question for you.
Yeah, I think it's more comments really. I mean, it's been really interesting to hear, and I think one of the key things that we're learning, and Michael is a great one for talking, as we know, we can hear is on these things, but it's around collaborating with the contractors and working together as a partnership. We've been doing a lot of work with a company called Morgan Sindall, with Michael, and getting getting things for free. In terms of decent ramps, and we use those we trialed those for free. We've trialed safety barriers and safety emergency resilient bollards, and we work really closely and try and improve the site experience. It sounds a bit trite, but it's improving the site experience for the highway user. One of the things that we found, because I'm not a cargo bike rider, when we lay out a cycle lane and there's bends on that cycle lane, have we given enough swept path for a cargo bike, or have we given for different types? So it's maximizing our opportunities, and there are people out there and companies out there who are happy to give out their equipment on a trial basis or on a pilot, and it's a win-win for not only for the highway authority, but for the contractor and actually for the public as well. Plus, it's a good shop window for that particular company. So we need to, as highway authorities or contractors, we just need to be switched on to get those opportunities and take them when we can.
No, you're right. I think there's a lot of innovation out there, but there's also, we need to do a lot more thinking outside the box, especially when times are hard.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Anybody else got a question? I think you might have answered everybody that's got something in the room.
I noticed Matt has replied. So we've a fleet of many small vehicles and HGV across London. Our Training for Drives incorporates a community module, which is e-learning and interactional. Happy to explore new areas or show and tell on the next session with a microphone that works. Yeah.
Fantastic. We love it. Thank you, Matt. That's brilliant.
I think it's great with having good sized companies like Jackie and Speedy, but then it's when you've got the individual or the small that are under more pressure. So it's how do we pass that on as well?
Yeah.
Right. Anybody else? Has Funke got any questions?
Just got one quick one for Dave of Glasgow, still there, if he is. I was looking through the legislation while we were talking, and we could probably use sections 149 to 151 of the Highways Act in terms of something that is a nuisance on the highway. So things like those ramps, if we as a highway authority consider them to be a nuisance, we can remove them under section 149 in England. All right.
No, thanks, Brian. I've just got one question. Shakira, do you feel comfortable enough to speak and explain your role at TfL? You don't have to if you don't want to. There's no pressure.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Shakira McMillan. I'm an apprentice in civil engineering, and I've just started working with one of the project management teams who are working on the major asset renewal projects for TfL. Yeah, great presentation, Michael. It's been really interesting.
And as from your role now, because you're the future of TfL, because us oldies are kind of getting to that top end of the line. But how can you kind of manipulate what you've learned today and then push that with the teams that you work with? And you're back on. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I can take a lot from today, especially regarding the inclusivity and like equality side of things. It's not something I knew about before joining this presentation today. So I've definitely learnt a lot that I can take forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can, with the other apprentices as well, I think this is where we had a discussion before, is having younger people with all fresh minds getting on board early, and then you can then take it on. But no, thanks, Shakira. Thank you. Any other questions? Pressing thoughts? Are you doing something bad that you now think you can do a lot better? Or you don't want to admit it, you can do it.
I think there's probably a lot of people like that. You've had a really nice comment here from Jonathan Groves, said, really very informative, really important, valuable points made. I think, Michael, all of your sessions that you've done will get lots of views on YouTube, won't they? Because I think people love to go back and just pick up on some of those best practices and like no-brainer light bulb moments that you put out on some of those drawings and visuals to say, you know, why do we think that? And I think John Holiday before, when he talked about, you know, we've hit that 1.2, we've done our job, and in practicality, when you have a look at it, actually, no, we're not, you know. So I think
I would always say, if you were doing some construction works in your mum's front yard, and she had to get access to a bus stop, what would you do? Would you do the bare minimum for your mum? So this is somebody else's mum, or somebody else's dad, or somebody else's cousin or best friend that could have barriers to access to face. And then what would we do? And I think if we take that, I always like to say, if we all go above and beyond becomes business as usual. If you take that approach, what I'm doing today is just showing pictures of, so now that's probably 2% of the pictures I've got. And I don't want to get them all out because it's depressing. And ideally, every now and again, I want to pull out the good stuff that people have done. Like the one with FM Conway was really out of the box thinking what we did for cycling, which was not really done before. And the stuff I did with Keir was different. And with Network Rail, even though it was a little bit hard in the beginning, using the modeling data, how we could then make a difference. So there's a lot of stuff we can do. And we're in a city. Cities are full of a lot of people. I know COVID's reduced that, but we are going back to that again now. So we take this on board quickly before we start, you know, impacting it. And Vision Zero as well, we have to think about, as well as the environment. There's a lot of stuff there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. I think no doubt it's been a very, very informative session for everybody.